You know, I grew up with caregivers who were worriers. They worried about everything. And I adopted a lot of those worrying traits, which I used to suffer from panic attacks, panic disorders, anxiety, and was always on some type of medication, anxiety medication, antidepressants, SSRIs, in order to regulate myself. And it was just because I was always in this heightened state of waiting for the shoe to drop. And even when I knew not to worry, mentally, my body was conditioned to being in this heightened state. And it almost felt like an addiction. And actually, it can be an addiction because anything can be an addiction. Because we feel that if we worry about something, if we're constantly thinking about all the worst case scenarios to which something can play out in our heads, we think that we will be prepared for the worst case scenario. But I got something else for you. And I hope that it changes your view on worrying, because the energy of worry inadvertently attracts situations that will prove the equation. And you guys hear me talk about proving equations or confirming the biases. And that's what this episode is about, is how can we stop worrying? How can we stop creating anxiety within ourselves? Now, let me just throw this disclosure out there. This does not negate real danger. If you are in actual danger, I want you to please take whatever measures is necessary to protect yourself. Also, if you are taking any type of medication for mental health, don't stop taking your medication for mental health without consulting with your doctor or whoever that you go to for these medications. So just keep that in mind. I will never, ever advocate that you just hop off these medications and go a different approach. Unless you feel within yourself that you can do that, you really want to do that in a healthy way. So just keep that in mind, that all of this information that I'm sharing is just for you to have just a different perspective on the concept of anxiety and worrying. And hopefully it can help shift you into understanding your true power and just having a different insight on this idea of not needing to include this in the equation in order to live a life of abundance and love and joy. Hey. Welcome to another episode of the You Are Limitless podcast. I'm your host, Madam Chiko, or Chiko Nowicki, whichever you want to call me, coming to you from the holistic wellness space as a spiritual transformational life coach. And I thank you for joining me here on another episode on Y'all. And if you're just not tuning in, I am so glad to have you here with me on my journey, on the show, and having me a part of your journey. You're always loved unconditionally here. This is my way of bringing psychology, metaphysical concepts, universal laws, as well as my own story of extreme limitations due to abuse, drug abuse, and being a justice impacted individual into the light, so that we can learn to let go of what doesn't serve us and start to incorporate more of what is part of our truth. Okay. So I'm always excited about getting into our vortex, raising our vibration, and discovering more of who we actually are by letting go of some of the limiting, yucky, negative beliefs that keep us from our truth. So, like I said in the disclaimer, we're talking about the energy of psychological worrying, where there's no real danger out there, but rather the danger is a perceived danger of what could happen in a future. So when we are worried, it takes us out of the present moment into a perceived future that may or may not happen. But whenever we are tuning our energy into these worst case scenarios, and then we are in that hypervigilant state, and we'll talk about this in terms of, like, again, with the law of attraction and just creating this self-perpetuating loop that we get stuck in. So we're going to talk about some of the origins of why we worry, because This is really a multi-layered concept, and I don't think one podcast can really fit in why we worry, but we can at least start to touch base on it so we can worry less. And I'm going to be using the word worry and anxiety interchangeably. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes it's just easier for me to say anxiety. Sometimes it's easier for me to say worry. I have no idea. Is this all just kind of pouring out? So the energy that I'm talking about is psychological worry, or where we are placing ourselves in this heightened state of uncomfortability because we are so used to the shoe dropping. But when we are in this state, it's actually counterproductive in that we attract situations that will prove that equation of the negative belief, of the worry, of the anxiety. And then we'll tell ourselves, see, I told me that this would happen, as a way to reward ourselves for buying into the worry mentality. And it's a cyclic loop. So this is why we got to talk about it, because to some degree, it is built into our biology to be on high alert in order to stay alive. And this is an extreme simplification of this concept, because I could go into details about how this is a symptom of disharmony within our society for thousands of years, and it's as to why it is now wired into our biology to look out for danger. We actually call this epigenetics, in a sense of it being a conditioning passed down from generations to generations that don't have to be this way. We technically don't have to be wired in a state of hypervigilance, but a lot of us grow up in environments that are harsh, whether it is our parents who were just helicopter parents. And by helicopter parents, that just means parents who are just a little bit constraining on what you were allowed or not allowed to do. There's some parents who are just so terrified of their kids getting hurt that they don't allow them to get hurt. Maybe your parents didn't let you play football as a child, or maybe you weren't allowed to go to sleepovers or what have you, because you just had a parent who was overprotective. And I know what that's like. This could also happen when you are in a state of survival mode as a child. And this could also play out as an adult too, but let's just talk about growing up and how you can really make the connections to where you got some of these overthinking tendencies, anxious tendencies, and then we can start making a connection as we go down the line. How does that sound, guys? So I hope that sounds good. And again, tailor these ideas, mold it to fit your own needs and perceptions, because this is just my perspective. I like to explain my perspective from my own experiences, from my clients' experiences, and also from reputable sources, just as a way to tap into that knowing, that inner knowing that is already within you. That's my goal, is to have you see that you already have all the answers you seek. And hopefully this is some level of a reflection. So yeah, let's also say that you grew up in an environment where it was abusive, where you dealt with a lot of abuse, whether it was emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. These types of abuses will put you in this heightened state of the shoe is going to drop. So you have to be prepared for that. And it makes sense. This is why we can have a lot of compassion for the way we show up for ourselves today, because the reason why sometimes we show up for ourselves in these ways is because this is how we had to show up for ourselves back in the day, whenever it was vital to our survival to make sure that we were on high alert. But in turn, now it's creating the dis-ease or the mental disorders. And I do not reject medications at all. However, I do believe that in the mental health industry, there is this disregard for people in terms of coupling medication with therapy, some type of talk therapy, something, or even hypnosis, anything, so that you're not relying solely on a medication for the rest of your life. This is what happens when you don't have a coach or a therapist or someone to intervene and you're just taking a medication. Well, what happens when you stop taking a medication? The medication doesn't train you to not feel anxious. This is why this is the perfect time to be alive, guys, because this is the age of information where there's unlimited information out there that can help guide you to victory. But as I said in the last episode, we really want to rely on our own intuition to be able to guide ourselves back into our truth. When we realize that a lot of the anxiety that we're attaching to, a lot of it is from past our past selves, our past identities, our past traumas. We can even throw in the ego. The ego is trying to latch on. The ego wants to hold on to everything because it is afraid of the unknown. And this is where the unknown gets really terrifying, or where we get into the future and it's not in a healthy, productive way. You can think about the future, which doesn't exist, by the way, because everything is here and now, as I always say. But you can think about the future and not get anxious. And this is when you start making plans for goals that you want to do, any type of project you want to accomplish, even having kids, you're planning for kids, and that's exciting. That's where you're using the future in a conscious way, in an exciting way. But when you're using the future in a way that feels like, oh, now I'm worried. What if this doesn't happen? And then all the negative overthinking starts to come in. We really want to thought stop, right? We want to put a stop to those thoughts, whether it is saying it out loud, whether you're saying, okay, stop. We have to find a way to thought interrupt. And that's a great way to thought interrupt. And we're going to talk about that last. Little tactics that we can do to thought interrupt, break the patterns, stop the anxiety, stop the worrying. Because whenever we are believing in the anxious stories that we're telling ourselves, what's happening is basically saying this is going to happen. And as you've heard me say before in other episodes, and if this is your first time tuning in, please go back to other episodes. They're so potent. There's so much information that you get from every episode. And if it doesn't resonate, really quick, just know that whether this resonates with you or not, I would love for you to share this, because know that I'm coming from a place of love, of unconditional love, and zero judgment, because I don't judge myself. Therefore, I don't judge anybody else. And it really helps getting the word out. So you can share this with somebody, because it may not resonate with you, but you may know somebody who could benefit. And the more less hurt people we have hurting people, the better chance we have as a collective to be in a place of balance and harmony and love and non-judgment. So do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, share this with whoever, and just know that you're helping a sister out. Get the word out, because I can't do this alone. And I really am so grateful and appreciative of everybody that listens to what I have to share and also shares their perspective as well, because the healing is a two-way street. So thank you for letting me share that. But back to what I was saying in terms of knowing that what you say goes. And so you're confirming the stories, you're confirming the anxiety, and then the law of attraction will bring you that confirmation bias. And then you'll think that, well, this is how it was supposed to happen. But in reality, there was a vibrational charge that was created within your being that created the outcome. So you got to shift, not believe everything that the ego is projecting, because the ego is just trying to keep us alive. And this is why we can tell the little guy to chill out, the little gal to chill out. Like, we don't need you to the extent that you think we do. So back to a little bit more about the childhood thing. Let's say you didn't really suffer abuse, right? And this could be abuse with a capital A or lowercase a. But even like being rejected in school, because one of our innate qualities is connection. We want to feel connected to people, not one just for survival, but that's just how we are as a species. We want to feel connected. And so if you were rejected as a child, then you may try to mold yourself into something that you're not in order to feel like this version of you will be accepted by people. And that can create anxiety. You see what I mean by, like, there's just so many different layers to anxiety and worrying, but a lot of it is predominantly all mental games that we're telling ourselves, and we're just creating all this psychological time that it takes in order for us to break free from the mental construct, the mental games that really are not serving us anymore, that maybe at one point was very helpful in keeping us alive and making sure that we weren't kicked out of the group, kicked out of the clan. But at the end of it, we're in an age where we don't need to rely on these weird stories that once were helpful in a day, but are actually sabotaging your growth, sabotaging your true self, because your true self is always there, but we dull ourselves out when we start telling ourselves these stories that aren't inherently true, unless you say it is. You are the ultimate truth. There's nothing out there. Not even what I'm saying is the ultimate truth, because you have to find that within yourself, what is true for you, and be conscious of what you're telling yourself in terms of like the anxious stories. Now, when it comes to anxiety, right? And let's say we've been in a heightened state for so long, and whether we're on medication or not, we become addicted to it. The body is addicted to it. Okay, so now it's in the subconscious brain that I need to be in this state in order to stay alive, in order for things to not happen that are bad, that we don't want. But it's really an addiction, and you can actually feel it sometimes. And there, and this does not include people who are just okay with being anxious or unhappy. I've come to realize that there are just some people who are okay with that. That is just who they have created their being around. So, but most people want to be happy. Most people, at least in my experience, want to feel safe without having to be always looking over their shoulder for something bad to happen. And so just constantly preparing for the worst, which in turn is using your creative energy to disempower yourself, to dysregulate yourself. So now you're having to use all this energy to calm down, all this energy to not go into a panic attack. When we can just start to shift our perspective into something that's more aligned to positivity, to things not hitting the fan. And even if things do hit the fan, okay, being able to regulate ourselves no matter what's going on out there, because it's only through our perspective do we define how things actually are. And let me repeat that. It is only through our perspective do we define how things are. So we define things based off of how we perceive it, if it's negative or if it's positive. For example, I could have something happen to me that in my mind, it's neutral, okay? Maybe I stop talking to an old friend because it is healthy for me to put up that boundary. And I've had to do this a few times with past friends where we're just out of alignment and there's no judgment, but it's not a good use of my energy or theirs to keep up a friendship that is not nourishing either of us, or whether it is me doing most of the nourishing and I feel depleted. For some people, they could label that as negative. What? Like, why are you being so negative? Why would you just cut people off or whatever? But for others, they could be like, oh, wow, look at you, Chico. Look at you go, setting your boundary. That's just a very, very bland example that I can think of at the top of my head. Maybe I'll come up with something else and we can throw it in another podcast episode. But do you see, like, everything's perspective. What one person can see as negative, another person can see as positive. Something could send someone into panic mode, but could send another person into fix-it mode, or even just a state of awareness of like, okay, it is what it is. So really important that we start to dislodge ourselves from the anxious stories and realize that we create the point of attraction. Okay, so if you think that the shoe is going to drop, then inadvertently the action that you take will be a reflection of the anxious vibration that you're giving off. This is why repetition in terms of telling yourself a different story and regulating yourself out of anxiety mode in a healthy way is so important. Whether it means that you go for a walk, and this helps me all the time. Whether you go for a walk, moving your body helps move stuck energy. Even if you got to twerk, okay? For my ladies and men out there who like to twerk, move those hips because we carry a lot of energy in the hips. So move your hips, release that energy. That'll bring you back into the present moment, because when you are feeling anxious or worried, you're more than likely, when you really sit down and think about it, and I really want you to do these things, any exercise that I give, I would love for you guys to do them and then tell me how it went. But when you sit down and think about it, when you're feeling anxious or worried, you're really not in a present moment. You are not. There's no way. Because in a present moment, you are not that trauma. You are not that anxiety at all. But you're bringing all of this into the present, and it's just literally kicking you out of the present moment. It's like this weird paradox. You're doing this weird dance that may not be necessary in order to get things done, in order for you to see your goals through, in order for you to be a better parent. So when you start to realize that a lot of these negative worrying tendencies come from either your parents, society, or it comes from your experiences growing up in general. It could be from high school. It could be something that happened in your 20s. It could be, from a night out of drinking and then something happened that was so traumatic. And now you're just in this heightened state trying to make sure that that thing doesn't happen again. It could be anything. And I'm not saying that you have to pinpoint each event in order to get things done. And that's something that I've taught in my coaching program, is that you really don't have to go back to every single memory in order to get results, in order to let go of some of the shadows. I think a lot of therapy, and maybe they're shifting a little bit, but I was in therapy for several years and all kinds, different kinds, but there's this idea of having to go back to every traumatic memory in order to dislodge from it, in order to disconnect from it. When in actuality, when you just start to do the work in general, whether you're going back into memory mode or not, you'll notice that things are just falling off. And you don't have to do that much. I promise you really don't have to do that much. And especially whenever you're in a space with someone who knows how to help get you there, help guide you there, that makes it even easier. But you can also do that for yourself too. So really start to connect the dots in terms of where is this voice coming from? It's not you. And you can realize when you sit there that it's really not you, and that you are out of the present moment. Let's come back to the present. Let's feel our breath. Let's love on ourselves unconditionally, whatever that looks like. And especially in hard times, we want to really shower ourselves with love. Otherwise, what else do we have? How else are you going to neutralize the negativity? You're going to neutralize it with love, with self-love. And then if nothing else works, if journaling doesn't work, which journaling is a really great exercise, whether it's audio journals or whether you're writing down your thoughts. But if that doesn't work, get moving, get twerking. I'm so serious. Get twerking, go for a walk, move your body, something, call a friend if that helps. But remember to not sit there and complain and complain and complain. We'll talk about complaining in another episode, because complaining energy is not the energy that'll get you what you want. And in fact, again, when you think about attraction, and hopefully you guys are really starting to understand that you are the creators of your reality, and you attract exactly what it is your vibrational tune is set to. Okay, whatever you're tuned into is what you will attract. You may not know how it looks like, and you may not realize that you attracted such a situation, but absolutely. And, maybe I'll do another episode on my story, because, I was in a state of blaming everybody else for everything that was happening. And this could also go with the responsibilities episode that I'm going to create. But I was in a state of just always blaming out there for the predicament that I found myself in. And to some degree, yes, there are limitations out there in society, and I'm speaking in Western culture, and particularly in the US, there are limitations based on living in a capitalistic system that exists, but it's up to you to match that limitation. And whenever I was matching that limitation, I saw the results of that. I felt disempowered. I felt anxious all the freaking time. But really, and I went on a little rant, but really, I'm sitting there complaining and complaining and complaining when that complaining energy is not getting me to move. It's not getting me to literally step into my truth and be the best version of me, to disidentify with the stories that I was telling myself. Whether it was stories of, well, it's my lot in life. I grew up with a lot of abuse, and this does not negate the abuse that I grew up in. And for sure, it was very traumatic. But at the same time, how else am I supposed to bring this story to you guys to help show you guys that you also can alleviate yourself from the burdens of being human in this human limited body, in order to come up from that and realize that you are much more than your body. You are much more than your stories. You're much more than that. You're much more than your anxiety. So quit waiting for the shoe to drop. The shoe's not going to drop unless you say it is. Okay? I promise you, you are so powerful. And that's my job. My job is literally to show you just how powerful you are, to help remind you, and really important that we practice this every time. Practice, repetition. The more you practice not feeling anxious, you start to rewire your brain and rewire what feels good to your body. Your body will finally get used to relaxing. It's okay. Your body doesn't have to wait for another vacation to relax. You can relax right now. And that is why it is so important for me to share this idea about anxiety, worry, energy. We don't have to continue playing out these worrying, anxious stories, okay? You are the captain of your ship. Tell yourself a different story. Tell yourself that no, you don't have to worry something there. Okay? You can get things done without throwing anxiety and worrying in the equation. So thank you guys so much for letting me share this idea. It's just been such a privilege because I can recognize when someone is just throwing themselves into worry mentality. And the more information we have in terms of why these things show up in our lives and how we can transmute them into something positive, into something much more aligned with who we say it is that we want to be, the better equipped we are to be able to handle all types of situations, no matter what gets thrown in your face. So thank you guys. I'm always grateful to get into alignment with our truth, with your truth. All my links are in the show notes. If you want to sign up for coaching, it's in the show notes. One-on-one coaching, absolutely. I have a few spots available. Like I said in the last episode, not as many spots. So definitely reach out if that's something that you really want to work on, want to get into. I'm also starting a women's group. So excited. So subscribe to my newsletter so you can get the dates on when that starts. We'll do an intake. I get to see where you're at, learn more about you, and we'll just dive into the positive group energy that we're going to be creating through my group, which is all about rewiring our beliefs, our negative beliefs, and understanding more of who we are, that juicy oneness, love that we come from by letting go of everything that isn't us. Thank you guys so much. And of course, I will be seeing y'all next week on the You Are Limitless podcast. Love you guys.